All right, let's jump right into this explainer and completely peel back the curtain on the hidden psychological forces that silently manipulate our daily decisions. I mean, we really like to think of ourselves as these completely rational beings, right? But the actual truth is, there are invisible triggers all around our environment that dictate our behavior in ways we rarely even notice.
So, have you ever caught yourself agreeing to something you, actively do not want to do? Maybe it's buying some gadget you absolutely don't need, or doing a massive favor for a coworker you don't even really like. It is a wildly frustrating feeling. You walk away thinking, why on earth did I just agree to that? Well, the good news is you aren't alone and you aren't weak-willed. You've simply fallen victim to a highly engineered system of influence.
We're going to figure out exactly why that happens by digging into this incredible source text by Dr. Robert Cialdini. He breaks down the very specific weapons of influence that are used against us every single day. The guy literally spent years going undercover, infiltrating sales organizations, fundraising agencies, you name it, just to uncover the actual science of compliance. Here is the game plan for our defense training today. We're covering 1. Automatic action, 2. The power of reciprocation, 3. The rejection then retreat technique, 4. Commitment and consistency, and finally, 5. Defending your mind.
Okay, let's start with part 1. Click, whir, automatic action. So, to survive the crazy, overwhelming complexity of modern life, our brains have to rely on automatic, pre-programmed tapes. We just don't have the time to analyze every little detail of every single situation, so we use shortcuts. It's actually a lot like a mother turkey. She will blindly care for a stuffed polecat, which is literally her natural enemy, if it just plays a pre-recorded cheep sound. And honestly, humans aren't much different. In this wildly famous experiment, a researcher asked to cut a line at a busy library Xerox machine. When she just asked to cut, only 60% of people said yes. But when she used the trigger word because, even just saying something as obvious as, because I have to make some copies, compliance shot all the way up to 93%. People blindly let her cut in line simply because they heard the word because. Click, whir. The tape plays.
Moving on to part 2, the power of reciprocity. This brings us to a really deep-seated cultural rule that practically overrides our free will. The reciprocation rule is just so incredibly potent because it enforces uninvited debts. A perfect example from the text is the Hare Krishnas. So they figured out that simply asking for donations in airports was not working at all. So they switched up their tactics. They started pinning these unwanted flowers onto travelers' jackets. If a person tried to hand it back, the solicitor would refuse, saying, "No, it is our gift to you." Only then would they ask for a donation. By forcing an uninvited gift on their target, they practically guaranteed a donation, totally exploiting our deep societal discomfort with taking without giving. And get this, it is unbelievably profitable. There's this classic experiment where a researcher, let's call him Joe, bought subjects a totally unsolicited 10-cent Coke. Later on, he asks those same people to buy some 25-cent raffle tickets. The folks who received that unasked-for Coke, they bought twice as many tickets as the control group. Joe secured a massive 500% return on his investment from people who felt culturally obligated to repay his tiny favor, even though they ended up giving back way more than they got. To really put this into perspective, this web of indebtedness is so historically powerful that back in 1985, Ethiopia, which was in the middle of a literal famine at the time, actually sent $5,000 in relief aid to Mexico City after a huge earthquake. Wait, why would they do that? Simply because Mexico had sent aid to Ethiopia 50 years earlier, back in 1935 during an Italian invasion. The human need to reciprocate actually transcended acute famine, thousands of miles, and immediate self-interest. That is how deeply programmed this rule is in our heads. Which leads us perfectly into part 3, the rejection then retreat technique.
Now we're looking at reciprocal concessions. This is a super devious tactic where someone makes an extreme request, fully knowing you were going to say no. Think about Dr. Cialdini's own run-in with a Boy Scout. The Scout asks him to buy a $5 circus ticket. Naturally, Cialdini rejects this. But then the Scout retreats. He says, okay, well, how about a $1 chocolate bar? Because the kid made a concession, stepping down from $5 to $1, the rule of reciprocity absolutely forces you to make a concession in return. So you transition from non-compliant to compliant, buying candy you don't even want, just to fulfill that psychological obligation.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the exact same tactic works at the absolute highest levels of power. Take the infamous Watergate break-in.
G. Gordon Liddy originally pitches this totally absurd $1 million espionage plan. It gets rejected, so he retreats to a $500,000 plan. Rejected again. Finally, he retreats to a $250,000 bare-bones break-in. Because the politicians in that room had just been hit with those massive initial proposals, the $250,000 plan suddenly looked like a totally reasonable concession. The contrast principle, mixed with the pressure to reciprocate a concession, made highly intelligent people approve a remarkably flawed plan.
You know, Leonardo da Vinci actually hit the nail on the head centuries ago. He said, "It is easier to resist at the beginning than at the end." He perfectly understood that once we let these psychological levers engage, they're almost impossible to stop. The momentum just pulls you right in.
All right, part 4, commitment and consistency. So, society really values consistency, but it can easily be weaponized against us. Our obsession with looking consistent forces us to justify our actions and radically shift our beliefs. Just look at this comparison. Simply taking a stand, like putting money down on a horse at a racetrack, will instantly flip a person's entire mindset. 30 seconds before placing the bet, they are tentative and uncertain. But 30 seconds after handing over the cash, suddenly they are highly optimistic and super confident in their horse's chances. Literally nothing about the horse changed, but the bettor's brain had to instantly align their internal belief with the physical action they just took.
To show you just how intense this is, researchers staged a fake radio theft on a New York City beach. Normally, people hate conflict, so when a thief grabbed a nearby radio, only 4 out of 20 onlookers did anything about it. But when the researchers simply asked the onlooker beforehand, "Hey, could you please watch my things?" an astonishing 19 out of 20 people chased the thief down. They literally physically restrained the guy just to honor that tiny prior commitment. That is the sheer, raw power of the consistency principle.
Finally, part 5, defending your mind.
So, the million-dollar question: how do we actually protect ourselves from this without becoming paranoid hermits who reject every single act of kindness? Well, you have to remember the jiu-jitsu metaphor. The people who manipulate us, these compliance professionals, they aren't using brute force. They're just triggering our own natural societal momentum and letting our own gravity do the heavy lifting for them. They present a small favor and then let our internal conditioning take over.
The absolute key to defense is mental redefinition. Say a fire inspector offers you a free home extinguisher, but then immediately pivots into a high-pressure sales pitch for an alarm system. You have to mentally redefine that initial gift as exactly what it is, a sales device. The reciprocity rule states that favors are to be met with favors. It absolutely does not require that tricks be met with favors. Once you redefine the gift as a compliance tactic, boom, you are completely freed from any cultural obligation to reciprocate, and you can confidently say no.
I am going to leave you to ponder this final thought as you go about the rest of your day. We all have these pre-programmed behaviors guiding our steps. The very next time you find yourself automatically saying yes, or maybe making a sudden concession, or vigorously defending a choice you literally just made, stop and ask yourself, who really pressed play?